At least 64 people have been killed in floods and landslides triggered by heavy rains in the Gamo zone of southern Ethiopia. Earlier in the week, officials had put the death toll at more than 30. Dozens are still missing. The authorities reported that most people had died in highland areas where saturated slopes gave way after days of intense rain. They have urged residents in vulnerable areas to take precautions. Torrential rains have unleashed widespread flooding across East Africa in recent days. Dozens have also died in neighbouring Kenya. Forecasters say storms are becoming more intense in the region, partly due to climate change. South Africa's National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Andy Mutibi, says the organisation remains committed to prioritising cases related to the state capture and Madlanga commissions as well as SIU referral cases. Mutibi says they are strengthening cooperation with their strategic partners and the public in efforts to combat and prevent crime across the country. He says the 24 state capture cases under investigation, 12 have been enrolled for prosecution. Mutibi briefed the media in Pretoria today on the NPA's strategic priorities, including the implementation of the Quick Wins Action Plan and other key initiatives aimed at strengthening prosecutorial capacity.
On the Madlanga Commission, the President issued a statement where he referred a number of officials for investigation. Those are receiving attention. And as I said, we are cooperating with the SAPS. We've given them the task team. We've provided 2 prosecutors from General Prosecution. They are senior prosecutors. So that's Madlanga Commission. The number of officials that have been mentioned, I think almost about 8 or so, are receiving attention.
India's Supreme Court has granted bail to the prominent Kashmiri separatist leader Shabir Ahmad Shah. The veteran politician was arrested almost 7 years ago, accused of funding terrorism and playing a key role in building a separatist movement. The BBC's Electra Naismith reports.
Supreme Court judges highlighted the lengthy period Shabir Ahmad Shah had already spent in custody and anomalies with how the trial had proceeded. The founder of the now banned Democratic Freedom Party was detained in 2019. He was said to have played a substantial role in facilitating a separatist movement in Kashmir. Strict bail conditions will now follow, but the decision represents vindication for his supporters and paves the way for the release of a man who spent a total of almost 4 decades in detention without ever being convicted.
Recapping the top story, the SAWA Ghana says it intends to propose a United Nations resolution recognizing transatlantic slavery as the greatest crime in history of humankind and calling for reparations. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, FIFA has slashed more of its operating budget for the 2026 World Cup. Roger Federer joins the Forbes World Billionaires list. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
The whole population of Africa has been shocked to the depth of its soul.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has been the voice that connects the continent, telling our stories and sharing our vision with the world. This year, we mark 6 decades of broadcast excellence.
60 years of stories, sound, and connection.
6 years of African conversations that matter.
This is 60 years of broadcast excellence.
Broadcast excellence, rooted in Africa's heartbeat and looking boldly into the future. Join Channel Africa as we celebrate 60 years of broadcasting. Still strong, still vibrant, and still giving you the African perspective.
Channel Africa.
Ngati uli oyimba watsopano yemwe akufuna kuti nyimbo zake zifike kwa anthu ambiri kapenanso kuti zimvedwa pa wireless. Ife tikuthandiza kuti izi zichitike. Chitani izi: tumiza nyimbo zako pa tsamba la internet la music@channelafrica.co.za limodzi ndi dzina la nyimbo, ISRC code la oyimba, mkonzi, chilankhulo, chamba ndi olemba nyimbo zako. Mvera nyimbo yako ya pa tsiku pa wireless yomveka bwino ndi Channel Africa ndi nyimbo zako. Sungaboweke kamba kokuti ife tisewera nyimbo yako. Mvera nyimbo zabwino mu Africa pa Channel Africa. Kalilole wa Afrika.
Annie Kalonji sur Channel Africa.
Comment est-ce que les militants et sympathisants du parti, les transformateurs, ont-ils réagi face à la condamnation de Succès Masra?
La condamnation de Succès Masra ne nous a pas surpris et les militants transformateurs ont été bouleversés et indignés étant donné que le verdict est un verdict lourd, illégal, injuste et donc face à la répression dans laquelle le peuple tchadien est confronté, les militants transformateurs se sont résignés de ne pouvoir pas sortir manifester. Et donc, c'est une situation totalement absurde pour un pays. Et aujourd'hui, nous célébrons le 11 août, fête de l'indépendance. On pensait que le verdict allait être plus ou moins clément, mais le verdict est sévère.
Annie Kalonji, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Siyabangena manje. Vito Jablan Kolele imagoda. Jablan is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. Very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Historia ya msikilizaji ya Valentine Day au siku ya wapendanao ilianzia katika nyakati za kale za dola la Roma. Watafiti wengi wa historia wanaamini kuwa siku hii inahusishwa na sherehe za kipagani zilizokuwa zikifanyika kila mwaka katikati ya mwezi Februari. Msikilizaji, sherehe hizo zilijulikana kama Lupercalia na zilifanyika kuadhimisha uzazi, upendo na mwanzo wa majira ya kuchipua.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Business, trade, and investment opportunities that put the continent first. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni.
It is a very good afternoon to you, Gabon. Good afternoon to you, Senegal. Eritrea, good afternoon to you, DRC. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I'm Thami Ngubeni. It is the 12th of March, Thursday. Yes, indeed. Here's what's coming up for you this hour. The rising global oil prices force South Africa's low-cost airline, FlySafe Air, to introduce a temporary fuel surcharge. And Gabon formally requests a program from the International Monetary Fund in a move to stabilize the country's finances. Do stay connected to Africa and the world with Channel Africa.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Inaelezwa kwamba serikali kule visiwani Zanzibar imetangaza mpango mkubwa wa kuweza kurejesha urithi unaoungwa mkono na uwekezaji wa sekta ya umma na binafsi yenye thamani ya dola milioni 12. Unadhani sasa Zanzibar imeamua kujipambanua yenyewe kama yenyewe?
Hizi ni habari njema kwanza katika kuongeza uwekezaji kwenye sekta ya utalii, ngoni mwa sekta mama kwa serikali ya mapinduzi ya Zanzibar.
Pengine unawaambia nini Watanzania walioko nje ya Tanzania na walioko ndani kuweza kuzitizama fursa hizi kwa jicho la pili na kuweza kuwekeza ndani?
Jambo hili lina mtazamo mpana. Cha kwanza ni aina ya maisha ambayo baadhi ya watu visiwani Zanzibar wamekuwa nayo, na hii ni kutokana na ile colonial legacy, ile kutawaliwa na wenzetu wametawaliwa na masultani.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
We begin here this afternoon with the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, the DMPR. They have assured South African consumers that there is currently no immediate risk of fuel shortages in the country. This follows public panic around potentially much higher fuel prices in the coming months, as well as supply risk concerns. However, it has conceded that the country will experience higher fuel prices come April due to the higher oil price, but will only be able to give the country concrete numbers just ahead of the increase on the 1st of April 2026. Nompumelelo Sizeba reports.
The Department of Minerals and Petroleum Resources says it remains in continuous contact with oil companies operating in the country to ensure the stability and security of fuel supply, while closely monitoring developments in the Middle East and their potential impact on global oil markets and fuel prices.
The Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources wishes to reassure the public that there is currently no immediate risk of fuel shortages in South Africa. While ongoing geopolitical tensions may exert upward pressure on international oil prices, the department continues to maintain close contact with oil companies operating in the country to ensure the stability and security of fuel supply.
The DMPR has confirmed what market analysts have been saying, that fuel hikes are inevitable, but that the level of increase will only be determined toward the end of the month.
It is important to note that the continued rise in international crude oil prices is expected to result in higher fuel prices at the pump from April 2026. The under-recovery of fuel prices has fluctuated since the onset of the conflict, and the department will continue to monitor the situation closely.
Meanwhile, South African Airways says it does not anticipate any immediate disruption to its jet fuel availability as a result of the tensions in the Middle East, but says it is also closely monitoring developments in this regard. Dompumelelo Siziba, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It has gone exactly 13 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. The rising global oil prices have forced South Africa's low-cost airline FlySafair to introduce a temporary fuel surcharge as it grapples with sharply higher jet fuel costs linked to the ongoing crisis in the Middle East. The airline says the price of Jet A1 fuel at South African coastal airports has now surged by about 70% in just 1 week, with no clear end in sight to the conflict and the resulting volatility in energy markets. FlySafair says the surcharge is necessary to help sustain its operations. For more on this, we joined on the line by aviation analyst Dr. Guy Leach. A very good afternoon to you. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Yeah, hi, Tammy. Nice to be with you and your listeners.
So how significant, Doc, is the recent surge in jet fuel prices for airlines? And how does it have, and why is it that it has such an immediate impact on their operating costs? One would assume that there's perhaps greater buffering?
Yeah, I think it says a lot about FlySafair that they felt it necessary to impose a surcharge so early, because most airlines, or at least the global standard amongst airlines, is to hedge as much as 80% of their fuel purchases forward. So what that means is that they buy or lock in the prices of fuel for the next 6 to 12 months. And it's not unusual for South African airlines to do the same. However, if they are feeling this exposed that they've got to put up their prices so quickly, then perhaps they haven't really hedged their fuel prices much, and they're subject to fuel price increases almost immediately. Let's also just point out, though, that FlySafair is mostly based out of OR Tambo, and OR Tambo is somewhat, should we say, protected from the worst of the fuel price increases, because it gets about 30% or even as much as 40% of its fuel from the Natref refinery in Sasolburg, and that shouldn't be, obviously, subject to problems with the Straits of Hormuz and fuel supply. And we are always worried about the actual availability of fuel, and if prices go up, it's obviously going to reduce demand for seats, and thus perhaps not put quite such pressure on the actual availability of fuel.
FlySafair is one airline, and it is one of other low-cost carriers that exist in the country. How difficult is it for low-cost airlines to absorb sudden increases in fuel prices without passing the costs on to passengers? In other words, is this something unique to FlySafair, or is this a fate that other low-cost carriers will also have?
Yeah, I think it's significant that the other low-cost carriers, well, the only other one that survived COVID is Lyft, hasn't felt it necessary to put up their prices. Perhaps they hedged their fuel prices better than FlySafair Air did, but neither has Airlink or Semair or any of the other airlines, or SAA for that matter. So I'm a little surprised that FlySafair has taken the opportunity. But what also happens is that people book and pay for their tickets quite far in advance, and the airline doesn't or is not able to put up those ticket prices. Those are locked in. So I suppose that, it does seek to over-recover from those who haven't yet paid for their tickets, still going to book, still got to pay. And that's probably the pressure that they're trying to put on the actual future demand. But again, my big concern is that flying is already expensive, particularly post-COVID, because of the lack of competition. We lost Comair, we lost Kalula, we lost Mango. I just fear that the demand is going to continue to fall off.
And talking about demand and competition, in what impact is this likely to have on passengers and their use or preference for FlySafair? Could the surcharge affect the company's competitive position against other local airlines, or others likely to also then follow suit?
Yes, very definitely. In fact, I've often pointed out that the low-cost carriers or airlines' single biggest competition is not necessarily their other direct airline competitors, but it's other modes of transport, specifically the bus. In other words, or if it's cheaper to take a bus to go and visit your auntie in Kwerba, people might do that rather than book an airline ticket. But it's going to have a significant impact, because FlySafair claims, I see in their latest release, that as much as 50% of their operating costs are fuel. That's quite hard to believe, because most airlines operate at around 30 to 35% of operating costs on fuel. But if it continues in this way, then the market is going to actually be impacted. Fewer and fewer people are going to be able to afford to fly.
So if the oil prices remain elevated as they are now, could the surcharge become permanent, or could it lead to broader fare increases across the industry?
I think the latter. I think it'll lead to broader fare increases across the industry as people build in, or airlines build in, the additional costs of fuel. I'm not quite sure why they decided to impose it as a single surcharge. Maybe they're hoping or were wanting to try and convince the market that it would only be a short-lived change, but I'm not optimistic at all. Even if the war in the Gulf does end in the next couple of weeks, as Trump has suggested it might, the after effects will linger for a long time while the airlines try to catch up with just backlog in demand, and therefore demand for fuel will be high as well.
Dr. Guy Leach, always a pleasure talking to you, sir. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you. That's aviation analyst Dr. Guy Leach. He takes us to exactly 20 minutes after 4.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
O conflito militar envolvendo o Irão, os Estados Unidos e Israel provocou uma escalada acentuada nos preços do petróleo, especialmente devido à ameaça de interrupção do tráfego pelo Estreito de Hormuz, responsável por cerca de 20% do consumo mundial de crudo. Para países africanos dependentes de importações de energia, esta tensão não é apenas um problema económico, mas também social, com impactos potenciais sobre inflação, custos de produção e acesso a combustíveis essenciais. Para perceber os riscos e possíveis respostas, falamos com o Dr. Lutumba Simão, economista angolano.
Para os países exportadores, vão verificar uma receita mais alta do que previam. E do ponto de vista de custo para as populações, vamos identificar que também pode aumentar a inflação, principalmente naqueles países onde, de facto, importam o crude e os combustíveis derivados do petróleo bruto.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
So we've just focused on the impact of the conflict in Iran and with Iran on the various low-cost airlines in South Africa, specifically FlySafair. And this ongoing conflict is reverberating globally, with the World Travel and Tourism Council estimating that daily losses of at least $600 million in international visitor spending across the Middle East. The crisis has disrupted air travel. It's shaken traveller confidence and strained regional connectivity. Africa's tourism sector is already feeling the impact as safety concerns and flight disruptions through key Gulf transit hubs threaten inbound travel to the continent. What it also does is raise fears of declining visitor numbers and revenue. Here is the CEO of Cape Town Tourism, Thami Ngubeni, discussing what impact the conflict in the Middle East has had on tourism in Cape Town and the rest of South Africa.
Cape Town shows no significant immediate hit to business. Flights are operating and visitors are still coming because it's our peak season. But uncertainty has clearly increased. When airspace closes and thousands of flights are disrupted, it shakes confidence well beyond the region itself. If this is short-lived, then tourism will bounce back quickly. If it drags on with recurring closures and higher fuel costs, the impact will become material for passengers, trade, and of course investors. Which is why I believe that we are in a phase of heightened vigilance rather than panic. Well, conflict anyway inevitably dents travel confidence, and that's exactly what we are seeing now. When airspace closes and flights are disrupted, it definitely creates uncertainty for travelers and airlines alike. And I believe we are living through that in real time as thousands of flights have been cancelled or rerouted away from the Middle East hubs. From our call around with members in Cape Town, the immediate impact is still largely operational rather than demand-driven delays or rerouting and people, of course, traveling with longer journeys. However, here at ITB, there is definitely a shared concern that is clear. It's uncertainty, and I think that question of how long, that's what makes it hard to judge the medium to long-term consequences of the war in the Middle East. In directly affected destinations, colleagues are already reporting cancellations and paused bookings. But for Cape Town, it's still too early to see a clear, measurable trend likely or linked solely to this conflict. What we typically observe in situations like this is a holding pattern. Travelers and trade partners pause. They watch the advisories and wait for greater certainty rather than cancelling everything outright. Our own members at Cape Town Tourism confirm that pattern, and demand is currently holding. So, however, conversations are more cautious from what we gather, and people want reassurance on routing, safety, and flexibility before they commit. Instability in an oil-producing region like the Middle East usually pushes up oil prices, and that flows straight into airline operating costs at a time when carriers are already rerouting around closed airspace. I believe that over time that trend or that tends to mean a higher airfare or reduced capacity on some marginal routes, especially on long haul. I believe that for a destination like Cape Town, that could slow down or slow probably the most price-sensitive segments, or even result in shortened trips and shortened stays, even if core leisure and business demand remains resilient. I also think that the positive lesson from the recent years in that people have consistently prioritized travel where they can, but we can't ignore the fact that sustained cost pressure would be material for passengers, trade, and investors if this drags on. When travelers rethink certain regions, they really give up on travel altogether. But what they do is they look for credible alternatives that feel safe, welcoming, and definitely well-connected. And I believe that that creates an opportunity for destinations outside of the Middle East. And if we can position ourselves to become those alternatives, we'll definitely win. In conversations here at ITB, I'm picking up some signals that suggest that there are some discussions around rerouting, and the interest is growing in that, with buyers, I believe, looking harder at stable long-haul options. For destinations like Cape Town and South Africa, this opportunity is to be visible, to communicate calmly, and then, of course, to show that we remain open, accessible, and ready to host travelers even as global routes are being reshaped. If this proves to be a short-lived crisis, history tells us that tourism can recover at remarkable speed once airspace reopens and, of course, safety is restored. I believe the real risk is the prolonged stop-start conflict with recurring closures. Then you will start to see a slower global recovery, delayed investment into tourism, and of course, what some analysts call a fragility premium. All that means it's just a higher cost and greater caution being built into long-haul travel, not just from an airline's perspective, but also for insurance premiums. But with that said, the sector continues to show extraordinary adaptability in recent years, from the pandemic to, of course, regional crisis, as we see. And the partnerships between airlines, destinations, and travelers have become more agile in responding to new realities. So our job at Cape Town Tourism is to keep building resilience, and we do that by, of course, diversifying our markets, building strong local and global partnerships, and ensuring clear and effective communication, so that as a destination, we can absorb shocks rather than to be defined by them.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It has gone exactly 27 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. In about 3 minutes' time or so, we'll be heading over to the markets desk, taking a look at the latest market indicators and also the latest from the business of sport. Also coming up after that, we'll take a look at our upcoming demand by Africa, really looking at climate finance. How is the continent going to finance the global climate change? And this is a throw forward to a very important gathering that we're going to be having, an initiative that we as Africa in Business as well, actually not Africa in Business, but Channel Africa and Africa in Business and all of the other shows on Channel Africa, really championing this cause of not only dialoguing about the challenges that we face as a continent, but ensuring that we are integral in finding collective solutions on how to move the continent forward. And our Africa Matters Symposium is an effort at doing this. We'll take a look at that, and just a reminder that our partners also include the Wits Business School, who will be distilling all of the outputs from the symposium into a document that can then be distributed into the industry to make sure that this is something that is beyond just one day, that it actually presents itself as something that's documentable and implementable in the future. That is Africa Matters. Also, coming up today, the World Bank has estimated that Gabon's economy grew by 2.9% in the year 2024. We'll take a look at what it is that was behind this growth. But the Central African nation still remains heavily reliant on a narrow export base. We'll break that down with Dr. Tafadzwa Ruzive, a postdoctoral researcher at the University of the Free State. That and a whole lot more coming up for you on Africa in Business.
The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
I Show Speed, often called Speed, who is a popular American YouTuber and live streamer known for his high-energy personality, loud reactions, and unpredictable humor. He visited Ethiopia, and he was shocked what he found out, actually, when he got to Ethiopia. He got to find out that, they don't use the Gregorian calendar. That is, we are in 2026 right now. And he got to find out they are in 2018.
2018? Nah, you trolling me. It's 2026. No. It ain't 2026? Wait, hold on. Wait, we in the past? Ronaldo is still in Real Madrid. Everything is in the past here.
Oh man, how shocked Speed was. He went back in time.
Saturday and Sunday mornings belong to the Morning Switch. 3 to 6 a.m. Central African Time.
It is 4:30 p.m. Central African Time. We head over now to the markets desk for the latest market indicators with Tabiso Lihoko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Sis Thami, and good afternoon.
$1 in South Africa is trading at 16 Rand 36. In Botswana, it's at 13 Pula 25. Namibia, 16 Namibian dollars 36. And in Zambia, it's trading at 19 Kwacha 40 to the dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 394. In Ethiopia, it's at 155 birr 517. Uganda, 3,000 shillings 682. And in Tanzania, it will cost you 2,000 shilling 592. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,394 naira. In Egypt, it's at a 51 Egyptian pound 896. Tunisia, 2 dinar 910. Algeria, 130 dinar 607. The Moroccan dirham is trading at 262 to the dollar. In Angola, the dollar will cost you 912 kwanza. The Congolese franc, 2,159 to the US dollar. Commodities markets now. Gold is trading at $5,177 and platinum $2,170 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $98.37 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabiso Lohoko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And standing by for the business of sport, a very good afternoon to you, Figile Lengwate.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good afternoon, Thami. First up, it's a World Cup 2026. World Football's governing body, FIFA, has slashed more than $100 million from its operating budget for this Summer World Cup in North America. In its annual report in 2024, FIFA's projected budget for the 2023-2026 cycle included $1.12 billion for operational expenses out of a total budget of $3.756 billion. The $1.12 billion included $280 million for technical services, $159 million for event transport, $145 million for safety and security, and $79 million for guest management. However, 4 different sources told The Athletic that FIFA staff at its U.S. headquarters in Miami are feeling strains after learning that cuts to the operating budget, including areas of safety, logistics, security, and accessibility, had comfortably exceeded $100 million. The U.S. Congress has allocated $625 million from the federal government to help venues with security costs. However, those funds have not yet been distributed due to a partial government shutdown that is impacting the Department of Homeland Security. The lawyer representing striker Samir Nurkovic in his ongoing $915,000, the amount owed to the player. SABC Sport reported last week that Nurkovic, through his attorney Davo Lazic, had opened disciplinary proceedings against both bodies for failing to use funds from Real AM's monthly grant as a solution. With the club now defunct, Lazic insists it is up to the 2 federations to ensure the Serbian striker receives what is due to him.
Well, I think, yes, the answer is affirmative, yes. There is a simple solution, there is a budget, there are rules, there are procedures. You just need to respect them, I do advise, different stakeholders in football, not only players, but clubs, agents, and some National Football Association. And my thought and my advice for everyone would be, at the end, respect your own rules, respect the contracts, and that's it. Basically,
Lazic says every department of football has to follow rules on and off the pitch.
You go on a football pitch, there are rules that are concerning so-called field of play. So when you get booked, what is offside, when you have a red card, being sent off, and what are the rules of the game, and you are supposed to follow those rules. Same thing is here. So basically, you have rules of the Football Association, you have rules of FIFA, you have status, you just follow, and you have the contract, and you have binding and final binding decision of both FIFA and CAS.
Tennis news: Roger Federer has added another milestone to his remarkable legacy, but this time it is off the court. The 103rd time tour-level champion has officially joined the prestigious Forbes World's Billionaire list, highlighting the immense success he has achieved beyond tennis. Federer appears on the 2026 ranking after building an estimated fortune of around $1.1 billion according to Forbes, becoming one of the few athletes in history to reach billionaire status through a mix of sporting success, endorsements, and business ventures. Let's end it with Proteas. That's cricket. The total prize purse for the T20 World Cup, $11 million, was the highest in the 19-year history of the biennial tournament. Though they fell short in the attempt to lift the nation's first T20 World Cup trophy, the Proteas team will be rewarded for their efforts at the Showpiece tournament, which was held in India. After reaching the semi-finals for the World Cup in the short format, the South African teams are said to receive $1 million from the International Cricket Council, the ICC. This prize money is likely to be split between the 15-member national squad and the team management. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. From markets to innovation, Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:37 Central African time. Thank you to Figile Lengwati and Tabiso Lehoko. We turn our focus now to the World Bank. It estimates that Gabon's economy grew by 2.9% in 2024, largely driven by the oil sector and public works. We'll be focusing on the story in just a moment. We'll be joined by Dr. Tafadzwa Ruzive, a postdoctoral researcher at the University of the Free State Office of International Affairs. We'll also this afternoon be looking at the SME sector, and this time with Nedbank, and this being across the African continent. But for now, Africa is demanding better access to climate finance as the continent receives less than 10% of global adaptation funding. This is despite being heavily impacted by climate change. In light of this, Channel Africa, together with the Wits Business School, will host the Africa Matters Summit. This will be held on the 25th of March in Johannesburg, South Africa. This year's theme is Climate Change, Financing Africa's Recovery. One of the panelists at the summit, Dr. Shingirirai Mutanga, a research director at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the CSIR, elaborates on the issue of climate change and finance.
Climate impacts is now our daily experiences with the harsh climate extremes that we are experiencing today. You speak of your floods, you speak of your heat waves, the fires that are sparked by the heat waves that we have, the droughts, the extreme, and the frequency of these climate events as of late has gone so up. And it's vivid in today's this world now, across the world, the impacts and the repercussions of climate change to the world today. And you are right to say that Africa is among the most severely affected regions from the ramifications of climate change, partly because we do not have sufficient resources to support the adaptation mechanisms needed in order to adapt to the unpredictable climate ramifications that we have in the world today. Issue of climate risk evidence and data infrastructure, which is a critical pillar for us to respond to climate change. And for this, we do have global world models that are used actually in climate science to predict or forecast, but there is need to downscale these to the regional context so that we better understand the impacts of climate change to the world. And part of the work that we do is this evidence building through climate risk analysis, using, of course, Earth observation data, where we integrate satellite integrated data, as well as climate models in order to support policy as well as investment decisions. And we do provide the technological innovation, particularly using artificial intelligence-driven climate forecasting and early warning system to support the climate risk mapping. And under this banner, I would say the key message there is better data, predictive analytics to reduce investment risk, and making climate projects more attractive, particularly to financiers, because there's a skewed the distribution of resources towards our uptake of climate finance within the world today.
That was Dr. Shingurai Mutanga, a research director at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the CSIR.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
It is exactly 4:42 Central African Time. The World Bank estimates that Gabon's economy grew by 2.9% in 2024. This was largely driven by the oil sector and public works. However, the Central African nation remains heavily reliant on a narrow export base, with 97% of exports coming from oil, manganese and wood. The bank warns that lower oil revenues and higher public spending have weakened Gabon's fiscal position, increasing fiscal risks and underscoring the need for greater sustainability. Now, Gabon has formally requested a program from the International Monetary Fund, a move that could help stabilize the country's finances and improve transparency. For more on this, we joined on the line by Dr. Tafadzwa Ruzive, a postdoctoral researcher at the University of the Free State Office of International Affairs. Doctor, welcome to Africa in Business.
Afternoon, Thami. Afternoon to your listeners.
So, Doctor, what does the 2.9% growth in 2024 tell us about Gabon's economic resilience, given its really heavy reliance on oil and a few other commodities?
The Gabon economy is showing a good signs of resilience, because in 2024 we can see that the oil prices were not that great as compared to today. They were about between $60 and $65 a barrel. Now they are between 90 and 115 per barrel, depending on which benchmark you use. So we are seeing Gabon being able to be resilient with oil prices half what they are, around half of what they are today, and the economy is still churning out some growth. So that's a very robust, and it's not robust per se, but it's a resilient economy that we have in Gabon. Though more could be done to diversify its sources of growth.
It looks like the World Bank is not quite sure about that measure of resilience, because they've raised their flags about Gabon's narrow export base. How sustainable is the country's growth if 97% of exports are concentrated in oil, manganese, as well as wood, and then it doesn't grow its exports?
The IMF is correct to raise flags as a lender to Gabon, because what they want from Gabon is for Gabon to be able to export enough stuff to create reserves for them to be able to pay back forex-denominated loans from the IMF. So on the ground, you can see that there's a huge investment drive that is currently happening. Gabon is trying to diversify its economy into other spaces. So that sometimes when you are a lender, when the person you have lent money to starts to build things instead of paying you back, would always signal that when it comes time for you to pay back a certain loan, due to the expansionary activity that you've done in your economy, you might not have that money to quickly settle the loans, which is, I think, what is the case in Gabon. However, almost 3% growth on $60 oil, that looks that is sustainable going into the future.
Right. So in 2024, Gabon recorded lower oil revenues. What might be the fiscal risks posed by these lower oil revenues and increased public spending on the other end?
Gabon's case is interesting because they are under the CFA franc, where their currency is pegged to the euro per se. So each and every dollar of tax revenue that they collect from their oil sales is directly transmitted into their, when you multiply it by the royalties, of course, and then the 75% oil cap cost that they split with the oil companies. When you look at their oil revenue, each and every dollar of their oil revenue goes straight into their fiscus. So when there are fluctuations in the oil price, because they are not a sovereign fiat currency, but that their currency is pegged, each and every dollar of revenue that they collect is that they get from in taxes goes exactly into their fiscus, into their pot for the fiscus. So once the oil price goes down, that directly hits their budget, and they immediately get into dire straits. So there's a direct, due to the currency structure or the institutional arrangement they have with their currency, with the CFA franc, and being pegged to the euro, any movement in their exports directly impacts their fiscus. And that, I think, that is what has brought us to this point where Gabon could be facing a liquidity squeeze as it is trying to manage its transition into other sectors outside of oil.
The country has requested a program from the IMF. What does this signify about Gabon's current economic situation, and how could this program help improve fiscal discipline and transparency in Gabon?
Going to the IMF shows you that after they have netted out their export, revenues and some financing help that they can get, maybe SDRs and concessional financing, they have been left with a gap in their accounts to balance their balance of payments. So they have got outstanding arrears in forex, most likely to imports for what they are for the investments they are using to diversify their economy. So that corner of the balance of payments, the financial account, that's where there's a gap. And usually when that happens, that's when you approach a board to come and help you from a financial perspective to fill in that gap, to be able to keep your fiscus going. So now, because it is a pegged currency, once they run out of exports and there's a gap in the financial account, that means they cannot actually make any payments, even in their domestic economy. So when you hear that a country has gone to the IMF to cry for to ask for financing, it's because that balance of payments aspect of the financial account has got a gap where, when you subtract all the revenues and incomes and payments for the country in a forex perspective, there is a gap. And I think, look, Gabon, since it has a gap there, that is why it is now approaching the IMF for a program to fill in that gap, to enable it to actually operate locally in its fiscus. Because of the institutional arrangement I've mentioned of them being on a currency that is pegged to the CFA franc, which is the euro. In terms of economic resilience, then there's it becomes a dichotomy there, because while they are diversifying and their economies are really churning economic growth, they've sort of run out of funds. They have a good program that is churning growth, but it is sort of just run out of money to continue going. So it's a balance between the two there. To a good growth program and financing. Yeah.
Dr. Tafadzwa Ruziwa, we'll leave it at that for this afternoon. Thank you so much for your insight.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir. That's Dr. Tafadzwa Ruziwe. He's a postdoctoral researcher at the University of the Free State at the Office of International Affairs. He takes us to exactly 4:50.
Your life, your rhythm, your Africa. Channel Africa. Find it for free on Google Play and the Apple App Store. African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Standing by to usher in Vous d'Afrique at the top of the hour. Say bonjour to you, Joël.
Bonjour à toi, Thami. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Restez connectés parce que tout à l'heure, dans quelques minutes, sur Vue d'Afrique, il sera question de l'Afrique du Sud. Le nouvel ambassadeur américain convoqué pour des propos non diplomatiques. Et nous parlerons également de l'attaque de drones à Goma en RDC et de la marche de la société civile. Et en deuxième partie du magazine, avec Jolino Sungu, ce sera les sports et notamment la liste des joueurs de la RDC pour les barrages intercontinentaux, mais aussi le nouveau sélectionneur pour les Panthères du Gabon. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci, Thami.
Merci beaucoup. That's Joël coming up at the top of the hour with Vue d'Afrique.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
So in our Nedbank SME feature today, we focus once again on small and medium enterprises. And across the African continent, these play a very central role in economic growth, in innovation, as well as job creation. In South Africa, the SMME sector continues to shoulder significant responsibility for expanding economic participation and creating employment opportunities. Nedbank's Pitch and Polish, a long-running entrepreneurial development program which is powered by business incubator RaiseCore over the past 15 seasons, has supported entrepreneurs in refining their strategy, in strengthening their systems, as well as building more resilient businesses. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Monique Shina, Senior Manager at Nedbank. A very good afternoon to you, ma'am. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Thami, and to your listeners and to your viewers.
So, Monique, thank you for joining us. Why is supporting entrepreneurs so important for South Africa and the broader African economy?
Yeah, entrepreneurship plays a critical role in the economic development. We know that small businesses create jobs, they stimulate innovation, and they contribute meaningfully to the local economic participation. However, starting a business and scaling a business are very different challenges. Many entrepreneurs have strong business ideas, but lack access to mentorship and networks and practical guidance needed to grow to become sustainable. And so supporting these entrepreneurs is really about investing in them beyond just funding, but also really building that capability and muscle, to support them in a broader ecosystem, as it were.
And what are some of the biggest challenges that entrepreneurs face when trying to scale their businesses?
One of the biggest challenges we've seen is this move from founder-driven businesses to system-driven businesses. In the early stages, entrepreneurs are often involved in every aspect of the operations. But as the business grows, sustainable scale requires systems and processes and deep strategic thinking. And so entrepreneurs often face challenges around access to markets and capital and experienced mentorship. But these elements have to be embedded in them, having to look at how do I actually build in systems that are going to carry me for the long term.
And so the programs that you put together, like Pitch and Polish, how do they contribute to strengthening entrepreneurs in those areas of challenge?
Yeah, so structured programs provide entrepreneurs with a safe but rigorous environment to challenge their assumptions and refine their thinking. Through mentorship and business training entrepreneurs are able to identify gaps in their models, strengthen their strategy, and develop the systems required to grow their businesses sustainably. The goal is to help entrepreneurs build businesses that can operate independently of the founder and scale over time. I guess also the other aspect around the building that we're doing with entrepreneurs is getting out of the founder's mindset and founders sort of delusions that exist. It's really getting them to dig deep and think strategically.
Right. And why is mentorship such an important part of the entrepreneurial development? You just mentioned mentorship now as really a key component in programs of this nature.
Mentorship provides entrepreneurs with perspectives and practical experience that is difficult to access independently. Experienced mentors can help entrepreneurs identify blind spots, avoid common mistakes, and make better strategic decisions. In many cases, the value of mentorship lies in helping entrepreneurs shift their mindset from managing daily operations to leading a growing business.
So tell us a bit more about Pitch and Polish, and maybe if you could cite, one or two success stories of entrepreneurial development that have actually come out of the Pitch and Polish program.
Yeah, many entrepreneurs who've participated in structured programs, especially like Pitch and Polish, what we've seen is that they come up with stronger systems. They come out with clearer strategies, and they have a more improved operational discipline. For example, past participants that we've had, we see that they've taken their products and they've diversified their offerings. They've improved operational efficiencies. And they've moved away from this kind of, I'm stuck and this is the way I do things and this is the way I've always done things. They start looking at it in a manner to say, okay, if I was not here, how would my business operate without me? How would it scale without me? Is it strong enough and strategic enough? Built to last, as it were.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Monique Shina, and all the best with the programs that you've put together for SMMEs such as Pitch and Polish.
Thank you, and thank you for having us.
It's been a pleasure. She is the Senior Manager at Nedbank. She also takes us to the end of Africa in Business for this afternoon, Thursday afternoon it is. I'm Thami Ngubeni. From myself and the entire Africa in Business team, give yourself a splendid evening.